Welcome to the Leading with Empathy podcast. I'm Daniel Murray, and my guest today is none other than the beautiful Michelle Bowden. Now, my big smile is because this episode is just full of generosity and warmth, which absolutely just flows out of everything that Michelle does. Michelle is a leadership trainer, a persuasion expert. She helps teach people how to convince, how to persuade, how to help people to have greater influence. And we talk about everything from the idea that is persuasion manipulation through to the importance of generosity and really caring about the people you're talking to. Michelle is such an expert. She's a beautiful keynote speaker. And from the start, you'll really get a sense of just her spirit and warmth. Please enjoy Michelle Bowden. Welcome, Michelle. So good to see you. Look at those bright colours. I'd expect nothing less from you. How are you today?
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, look, I love all these bright colours in the background, and I want you to, in a moment, talk a bit about your background, where you came, how you got to doing what you're doing now. But you disclosed to me in private, and I'm going to now tell the world, you've got a fine arts degree and actually painted that beautiful painting behind you.
Yeah. I don't know if you'd call it beautiful, joyful, maybe.
Joyful. I'm happy with that.
Definitely not talented.
Well, tell me, why did you go into fine arts? Why did you do that as a degree?
Yeah, I came out of school at the age of 17 in the nation's capital of Australia, in Canberra. And my dad said to me, "You've got to go to university." So I did what my dad said. I was young and I didn't know any better. And so I went to ANU in Canberra, and I thought I wanted to be a psychologist because I'd been a ballet dancer in the Canberra Youth Ballet Company, and I knew a lot of people with eating disorders. So I decided I'd be some sort of dietitian or psychologist because that was a matter that had been on my mind a lot for many years. And I started trying to study all of those things and then was really bad at maths, which is hilarious because later in my career, I ended up teaching tax for Lend-Lease. And now I run a company and I have to be very on top of the money and the numbers. So it's hilarious that I was so bad at maths, but I failed the stats part of the psychology. So the other subject I was very good at university was art history. And so I segued into a fine arts degree and came out of ANU. I got offered honours, but I decided not to do it. And my ambition in life was to be a curator in an art gallery.
Wow.
And then partly I couldn't get a job. I came out of university in the recession, and partly I couldn't get a job, but also partly I just thought I've got the wrong personality to be sitting in the back of an art gallery in the dark all day. I should be joyful and being with people. So
yeah,
here I am.
Well, absolutely. And for those people who don't know, you are one of the brightest people I know. Definitely one of the people who lights up a room. And you're a speaker, you're a trainer. You help people all around this idea of persuasion and how do we persuade others. And I think we're going to be able to explore some of maybe that background in psychology that has helped you get there as well.
Yeah.
But maybe just talk a bit about what you do at the moment. Like, what's the Michelle Bowden we need to know?
Thank you. Well, there's three main things I do in my company, which I've been running for 25 years. The first thing is I run a 2-day presentation skills course every week of the year. And I have done for the last 25 years. So earlier this year, I hit the 1,000 milestone, the same 2-day course for 1,000 times.
Wow, congratulations.
So I'm very good at that.
Amazing.
Thank you. And then the other thing I do is I coach executives and celebrities for the stage when they've got an important keynote or an important roadshow or something to go on and they want to be better at working out what the whole point of their presentation is and then crafting up the message and then delivering the message. So that's one of the other things that I do. I coach people. I'm having a funny experience at the moment. I logged on to do some coaching with someone in Saudi Arabia the other day.
Wow.
And I'd done a little bit of research, but I wasn't 100% sure who I was even coaching because there was a lot of cloak and dagger around it, and the private secretary had been in touch with me, and in the end, I thought, well, I'll just turn up and see who it is. And when I logged on to the call, there was someone else on the Zoom and they said, Mrs. Bowden. I was like, oh my God, I haven't been called Mrs. Bowden very much in my life. She said, Mrs. Bowden, I'm just here to remind you that you need to refer to His Excellency as Your Excellency. And I went, oh my God, who am I coaching here? And as it turns out, yes, Your Excellency. I
Wow.
can't give too much more information about that away at this point, but needless to say, when this person logged on, I said, oh, would you like me to call you Your Excellency? And he said, no, just call me by my first name. And so now we're mates. But when I log on, he has the full, the royal flags and the whole thing going on behind him in
Wow.
his Zoom picture. So very different to me with my big bright colours behind me. So I've completely digressed. I have no idea.
No, no, not at all. And look, I think that's the idea of presenting. So obviously, we both do it regularly all the
Yes.
time,
Yes.
and make a living off it. And other people are terrified about it. And
Yeah.
I'd love to explore what are some of the things you see people do wrong. One of the
Mm.
things I often see, I'm sure you see this, is they'll start by thinking, I better open a PowerPoint and start
Ah,
writing bullet points on a
yes.
slide. Is that
Please
something
don't.
you see?
That's it. I mean, that's the common way. You go to your PowerPoint and you download all the odd slides you ever used on that subject matter, and then you put them in some kind of an order and work out what you're going to say. And that's the complete wrong thing to do. It's the greatest common mistake, I think. The better approach is there are three strategic phases in a good workplace presentation, which is different to an academic presentation or a university presentation. And those three phases it's not rocket science. They are analysis, design, delivery. And there's formulas for each of those things. There's a 5-step process for doing your analysis and working out what's the current state of your audience and what's your desired state for them. Where do you want to shift them to? There's a lovely quick 5-step model to do that. Then there's the actual creation of the presentation, which has nothing to do with the slides, actually. It's all about your script and the words you're going to say to the other humans. And there are 2 amazing models that help you to do that. And then the slides get created once you've got a really great comprehensive presentation script that you're sure is going to shift your audience from where they are to where you want them to be. That's the moment to create some amazing slides that really bring the whole message to life. And then the third phase is the delivery phase. And that is everything from your rehearsal and your practice that you really should be doing, which is another common mistake. I think a lot of people see presenters like you up there on the stage and they think, oh, it comes naturally to you. They don't realize you've had to actually practice that a lot to make it look natural.
Yep. Yeah.
And a lot of presenters don't admit that they rehearse, but good speakers rehearse, and we rehearse all sorts of weird stuff. We rehearse where we're standing, which hand we're moving, when we're clicking a slide, how we're running an activity, how we're interacting with the audience. We practice our jokes. There's a lot that we rehearse. And in my training, I teach people how to rehearse in particular the opening and the close, because if you can open well and close well, then boom shakalaka, the whole rest should go well too.
Yeah, you're right. People often say, "Oh, how do you get more natural on stage?" And I say to them, the same way that the Rolling Stones did. They
Yeah,
just practiced a lot,
that's
right?
it.
Even now, they rehearse before they go on tour. It's just
Yeah, of
rehearse,
course they
rehearse,
do.
rehearse.
Of
Yeah,
course they do. That's it. And, there's this, a lot of people will say, which is bizarre to me, but they'll say, it's very common for people to say, if I rehearse, I sound too scripted or I sound too robotic. I lose my authenticity. And I say to people, well, you haven't rehearsed enough then. You haven't quite hit that sweet spot, which is where suddenly it does seem to the audience that it's all off the cuff and natural and that you're just speaking as if you've never rehearsed it at all. But if it's in any way feeling clunky or just not smooth in the way you're delivering it, then I reckon you probably haven't practiced it enough.
yeah. One of the things, I don't know if this is a recommendation you'd give or not, but one of the things I find is a lot of the stories I tell on stage,
Yes.
I'll tell them a lot when
Oh,
I'm having
yes.
conversations, when I'm having
Yes.
lunch with someone, they talk about
Yes.
something. I sort of give a version of the story, and it might be
Yes.
shorter or longer or whatever, but
That's it.
it just embeds that story that I can't, like, it's just a go-to.
That's it.
Because,
Great
one of the
advice.
things that can happen is you can be in the middle of your presentation and I don't like palm cards or things like that. But you can be in the middle and feel a bit lost, or you're not sure where to go. And what are
Yes.
some of the things you would sort of
Yeah.
recommend? Obviously, practice more, but
Yeah.
even if you
Yeah.
practiced and something just hits, or
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
asks a question that throws you
Yeah,
sideways, what do you
throws
do?
you. That's it. Well, this is the greatest fear. Public speaking is one of the top fears for people. And the reason I think it is one of the top fears is because we don't want to look like an idiot in front of our colleagues, our audience, our stakeholder, our client. And we're panicking that we're going to go blank in the middle of it, which is exactly your question here. So if you can resolve this problem, then there's really nothing to worry about, right? So I do have a few suggestions. The first one is create it properly in the first place. So follow the process, analysis, then design, then delivery, rehearse it. The second thing is be able to rehearse, like when you're rehearsing, be able to start from any moment. So pick a spot at the 20-minute mark. Can you go from there? Then from the 35th minute, can you go from there? And if you can just pick it up in any moment and go from there, then that's a pretty good sign that you do know it. And that if something does distract you and you do get a bit of a brain fart for a minute, you should be able to just pick it back up again. But the best simple thing that all listeners here today in this amazing podcast of yours is that they can do is just have a glass of water somewhere really close, fake the cough, walk over, get the drink. While you're getting the drink, check the notes, collect yourself, and then walk back to the middle and keep going. No one's ever going to mind that you had a bit of a cough and got a drink to clear it. What they will perhaps judge you for is if you're trying to struggle through and you don't know what you're doing. So I think that's one of the things that I most coach executives is the cough and the walk to the lectern, get the drink, check the notes, calm yourself down again, and then off you go again. There's a few reasons why you go blank. The first is you're not breathing properly. Diaphragmatic breath is very undervalued by a lot of people in public speaking. You got to breathe right down into your belly button. If you're breathing into your bosom, into your chest, or into your shoulders, so when someone breathes deeply, if their shoulders go up or if their boobs go out, that means they're not breathing deeply enough. The breath needs to go right down into the tummy. And when that happens, the medical explanation of it's quite complicated, but essentially what happens is the oxygen goes up to the brain, and that's what allows you to think clearly. So if you're not breathing deeply down into your belly button and you are only breathing into your chest or your shoulders, eventually what happens is you run out of oxygen, and small things in the audience, someone looks at their watch, or something drops on the floor and there's a little noise, something, the door shuts. Those little weird things can really distract you and make you go completely blank.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned one of the things I often do as well in those moments is just ask the question in an audience and get them to talk to each other. So
Yeah, yes.
if I've forgotten
Yeah.
what I'm going to say
I
next, just
love
say,
that.
"Hey, look, I'd
Talk
love
turn
you to
to
have
a
a chat.
friend.
Talk to the person next to you. Just what did you take out of that session, or what did you say? They don't
Yeah,
mind talking. Totally
that's
distracted."
it. That's it.
Um,
And I mean, you and I are experienced and confident enough that honestly, like what I just did with you, then what am I even talking about? I've lost the plot. What was I am frequently known for saying that to an audience. What was I saying? And then the audience will tell me, and I go, okay.
Yeah,
Keep
absolutely.
going.
And one of the things I think you do so well that, again, I'm sure you teach this, is smile, is have that positivity, is,
Yeah.
be really, I would say that sort of generous energy that you
Oh, thanks.
bring, because
Very important word to me, generosity. It's one of my 3 most valued brand words, generosity. Thank
tell
you
me,
very
tell me
much.
more about that. I mean, because I
Oh,
think the generosity, the
yeah.
smile, and I think it makes the audience want to care about you, and therefore you get
Yeah,
away
yeah.
with asking questions. But why is
Weirdly,
generosity so important?
weirdly, I do actually love all people, even when I don't know them, which is, I know, weird and unusual. I just have this really deep love of other people. And it's very important to me that I serve them and that I help them. And so presentation skills has always been something where I knew I could make a difference, and I could see the difference from day 1 to day 2. I could see them transform, and then when they tell me it was life-changing, then that makes me feel good. But none of it happens unless I have that generosity of spirit. And none of that happens if I worry about myself or my own miseries or my own family problems or dramas or whatever else is going on in life, because we've all got that going on in the background. it just people don't care about that stuff. They just want you to be there for them. And actually, great speakers. There's something really cool called the law of requisite variety, which states that the person who can flex the most in a communication scenario is the person who's going to have the power, because the person you're communicating with is static, they're stuck, they're stubborn, they're inflexible in their thinking and approach. So if you think about boxing, you know, if a boxer was standing still, but there was someone else darting and weaving all around them, then that person's got a lot more power to actually land a punch that's going to, you know, win the boxing tournament. So clearly I'm not an expert in boxing, but the idea of that, you know, so that's the law of requisite variety. So I really strongly believe that the audience shouldn't actually know too much about, there are 50 personality filters in every human, and the audience shouldn't be able to work out which one you are. Are you an introvert, an extrovert? Are you a thinker, a feeler? Are you a matcher, a mismatcher? Are you a global or a specific thinker, a black and white thinker, or a grey thinker? You know, people shouldn't know that about you as a presenter, because you should be everything. You should be both extremes of all 50 filters. And when you can do that and forget about yourself and your own needs and actually serve the audience and give them what they need, that's when you actually are at your most powerful, and they get what they needed from you, and then they love you.
Yeah.
Which is what I want anyway, is the love.
Yeah, that's right. Where do you think that comes from in you? I'm interested in you, that this generosity, this, I love owing all humans. Spoiler if you don't know this, Michelle, not everybody loves all humans.
Oh, I do know it's weird.
Well, and actually, I know a lot of people who don't love many humans at all.
And look, a lot of people don't love themselves either.
Yeah.
There's something silly that I do in my presentation skills course. After they've presented without notes and they've smashed it and they can't even believe that they've done it, I make them raise their hands in the air and say, I love my own guts. And honestly, you'd be shocked at how many people can't do it. They can't put their own hands in the air and they can't say, I love my own guts. Not because it's slang or crude. They quite literally do not love themselves. And so they can't make themselves say the words. And I find that devastating. And if there's anything I can do with that person over 2 days to help them transform that thinking, then bring it on. I'll do whatever I can. I think, you know, so yes, it's weird to love others, but a lot of people don't love themselves either. And that's probably, and so my third thing that I do in the business is I teach persuasion. I work with pitch teams to win multi-million-dollar deals, like $700 million deal was the last big one that I did. And, you know, in persuasion, again, you've got to love yourself. You've got to back yourself. You've got to believe in yourself. You've got to love your content. Whatever, if you're selling a product or a service or have got an idea of something, you've got to love that. Otherwise, at a cellular level, you're just not convincing. And yes, I think it kind of all links together, that love yourself, try and love others. The more you can create that goodwill and that rapport and all of that, then the more powerful you are in the world anyway. You know, I've got a good life because I'm generous. It serves me just as much as it serves the recipient of my generosity, you know?
Yeah, and look, I've found, particularly working with lots of leaders, that there's this challenge sometimes they have where their want to be right overcomes their ability to get the right outcome.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's sort of that space of, you know, don't never pick a fight on stage with someone in the audience, because even if you win, you probably lose.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's really about, again, believing and being passionate, but not falling into that defensiveness.
Yeah,
What do you
well,
see
back
in
to
this
my
space?
silly boxing analogy, that person who's standing still thinks they're right.
Yeah.
But the person who's ducking and weaving all around them is going to win that fight. There's no doubt about it. They're still, they're static. They're really easy to punch.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
Maybe
know?
maybe a tip then, that if we could dive into quickly. What do you do? Because this happens, right? I've got a few. I've seen some of this happen to myself and others, where you get someone in the audience who's a bit prickly, or they've got their soapbox they just can't wait to get out, or you know, there's something going on for them, and they think this is the right time to tell everyone about it. What are
Mm.
some of the things you would sort of suggest to do in that situation?
That's a great question. I think that when someone, well, firstly, I think many people have that going on. We've all got our own thoughts and feelings about whatever the content is that's being discussed in the moment. So if you're a leader, some of the team members don't love your decisions or your leadership style. If you're a speaker on a stage, not everybody loves the vibe of you and the content that you're covering. That it just doesn't matter what you're doing. There's always going to be people who've got objections in their mind. There's three main objections that we have to deal with as humans in the world. The first is called a content objection. So something that you're saying, they just don't like it. I'm a leader. I say, you have to put your expense claims in by the 20th of the month. And I just think that's a stupid idea. Why does it have to be the 20th? Why can't it be the 25th? That's just stupid. I'd rather not do my paperwork. I'd rather be out selling to my clients. So that's a content objection. The second kind's a bit yucky. It's called a personal objection. So that's life. Not everybody loves you, you know. And then the third kind of objection is called a logistics objection. Something's logistically difficult that's making that person have difficulty listening. Like, there's something going on in their family life, their kid needs picking up from daycare, or their mother's ailing in the nursing home or something, you know, haven't bought the dinner yet and have to go via the supermarket and it's inconvenient on the way home, like all that stuff. That's what we call logistics objections. And my advice to all people when it comes to persuasion or presenting is that you need to manage what we call consensus objections up front before the person even mentions it. You should know your audience well enough to know roughly what are the things that are going to prevent them from saying yes to you. And then you should manage those things before they even talk about it, so that then they feel like they can move on. So in an example of, let me do an example about persuasion. So I speak on the speaking circuit about persuasion, not about presenting, because I realized over the 25 years that I'd been teaching this that actually people didn't really actually want to be better at presenting. They put presentation skills on their performance appraisal, but that wasn't actually what they wanted to be better at. They wanted to be more convincing and influential when they're in meetings and in conversations. And so 100 years ago, my course started being called Persuasive Presenting. And now I speak on the speaking circuit about persuasion. So one of the things when I take the stage that I know people are worried about before I've even gone into any other content is that, isn't persuasion manipulation? Right? I'm sure there's lots of listeners to this podcast thinking, yep. Isn't it the same thing? So in the first sort of 5 minutes of that presentation, I explain the theory of influence, and I explain where manipulation fits into the continuum, and I explain that persuasion is in a different part of the continuum, and I resolve that concern that they've all got, and then they all think, okay, well, if it's not manipulation, maybe I could be it. Maybe I could be persuasive. Maybe it will make me more powerful in my life. So, okay, now I will listen to her keynote.
Yes.
So I think better to manage this stuff up front and before they even mention it. If not, then as soon as they mention it, on my blog, and you've heard me talk about this, there's a technique called poo. I love a bit of toilet talk in life. So it's called POO, pacing out objections, and it's a 5-step linguistic pattern for managing conflict. And that is the technique that you use if someone raises an objection and you need to manage it on the spot. Or even if someone asks you a question in a meeting and it's a bit snarly the way they ask it, and you get that feeling on the back of your neck that they're being a bit aggro, then this technique called poo is also very helpful for responding to a question when someone's a bit snarly.
I can imagine people are now opening another tab and going, Shell Bowden poo. That's going to
Poo,
be a
that's
Google
it.
search
Yeah,
term that we should.
I'm sure it would come up. I've never done it, but I'm sure it would come up actually.
I'm going to try it straight after this.
Resolving conflict like a pro is the name of the blog.
Perfect. But look, you're exactly right. And it is really common that, I find when I talk about empathy, I know
Yes.
there's people sitting there who are going, oh,
That's
we don't need this soft skill
That's
rubbish.
it.
And so very early on, I talk exactly why it's not soft skill rubbish, and it's really
Yes.
important. And you go up
Yeah,
front
that's
with
it.
that stuff. I think that's a really important piece. You mentioned this idea of having to know your audience,
Yeah.
and whether you're going to persuade people in a meeting or you're talking to a group of people in lots of different contexts, the most common thing I hear people say back to me is, but how am I meant to know all of them? There's so many of them, and everyone's different. How do what are some of the things? Because I know you're really fascinated by people, and yet that's come through
Yeah.
so many times. How do we get to sort of know our audience better?
Look, I think there's a complicated answer to this question, and then there's the fast answer. And the fast answer is there's an amazing book called Figuring Out People. It's written by two fellas, Michael Hall and Bob Bowden. Michael Hall's Australian. Figuring Out People is the 50 different personality filters that we all have in ourselves. It's probably the best book I've ever read in the universe, and I've written to myself, so that's saying something. And that explains all of the 50 filters. So, like, you might not know, let's say, there's 2,000 people in an audience for speakers like us, or even 1,000 people in the audience. That's a lot of people. You can't know everybody's inner thoughts and feelings, but you can roughly understand the possible options of thought that they could be having based on understanding the personality filters. So, for example, the easy one that everybody knows is the introvert extrovert filter. So introverts are people that get energy from being with themselves, that reflecting on their own thoughts and ideas, and extroverts are people who get energy from being with others. And if you know that some of the audience are introverts and some of the audience are extroverts, then it's very important that at any given moment in your presentation, everybody is being taken care of, regardless of where they sit on that continuum. And there's 50 of those things. So it's a lifelong journey, I think, don't you,
Yeah,
to understand people. That's why I think that book is so important. And do you know, anytime, but it's all about empathy, which is your whole expertise, isn't it? That the more you know others, then the more you can appreciate the filter through which they are seeing the world, and then the more empathetic you can be to them, and also the more persuasive you'll be. So that's why you and I go together. You know,
absolutely.
yeah,
And, that I think that's where that generosity also comes in. That
yeah,
curiosity that
yeah,
and this happens commonly for me, where someone will say something, or I'll be going to a conference and I'll talk to people beforehand and I'll ask them some questions and sort of get that sense of, hey, that's interesting. Tell me more about that and what's going on there and how does that work? I think
yes,
that's a
yes,
really
yeah,
underrated part of being a speaker or a presenter is
yeah,
actually spending time understanding the people.
yeah, absolutely. And a leader. I used to have a keynote called "Why is everyone around me so dysfunctional?" And I say that with my tongue in my cheek, because with my personality, I don't think anyone's dysfunctional. I just think they're different to me. But if you, which is where empathy comes from. But
Yeah,
if you understand that anything that's irritating you in somebody else is it's just highlighting to you that there's a continuum of approaches and that you must be on the other end of the continuum. And oh my God, at 7 years of marriage, I've been married for nearly 28 years, I think. And at 7 years of marriage, I thought my husband was a pain in the neck. I went to a marriage counselor at Relationships Australia. I said, this guy's driving me nutso. And she said to me, she let me rave on about all his problems for 30 minutes or something, as if I was correct. And then she said to me, I've got one word to say to you. People can't read your mind. She said, men can't read your mind. No one can read your mind. And it was like a blinding flash of the obvious to me. No one can read you. No one knows what you want. No one knows what you're thinking. So backing yourself, believing in yourself, being able to communicate clearly and effectively what it is that you need from others, which is where my whole thing about persuasion comes from. It just makes life so much easier. I don't sit in misery in my life because I know how to be persuasive. Something's bothering me, I fix it. Do you know, we did a similar roadshow, you and I, same customer, and there was this amazing woman in the audience. Her name was Jenny, and I'm sure she won't mind me explaining what her real name was. Jenny had been married for 47 years, and for 47 years, her husband had made her coffee every morning and left the ring of the coffee underneath the cup on the bench. 47 years of marriage, that woman has wiped that circle of coffee off the kitchen bench so that the husband didn't have to replace the bench when it had nasty coffee circles embedded into the granite or whatever it was. And she comes along to this training course, and we have these great laughs about how you can get the husband to wipe his own coffee ring. You know, she'd been like, I'm exaggerating, but sitting in misery over a circle of a coffee cup is a waste of your life. And there are so many of those annoying little things that happen in every single one of our days, every day. Don't sit in misery, rise up and solve it.
Yeah, and this is probably the thing that really we need people to understand, because it's not just presenting, it's not speaking as a
No,
leader to your employees.
no.
We need to get better at having tough conversations, at disagreeing
Yes,
and arguing, because
yes.
what I see too often, I'm sure you see the same thing, is I won't disagree with someone because I know that will be a fight. And actually, I need to disagree with that person, but I need to do it so that it isn't a fight.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think
it.
that's where, when
That's
I've
it.
read your work or listened to you speak, that's really where the magic is, isn't it? How do I
Yeah,
influence people, communicate with people, disagree with people, but
that's
not be
it.
disagreeable?
That's it. It shouldn't be a fight. If it's a fight, I wonder whether you are manipulating, actually.
Mm.
And now you've moved into the aggressive end of the continuum of influence, into forcing and directing, manipulating, coercing, those kind of things. That's not good. And you've lost the plot a bit. So I think you need to step back from that situation and think, well, how can I do this, as you say, in a way where it's not a fight? There are actually four main ways we go about persuading the people around us, and each of there are four types. Most humans are strong in two of the ways and weaker in two of the ways. And the reason why it's important to understand this is that if the communication scenario requires your strength, you'll just talk. It won't be a fight. You'll just say whatever you needed to say. They'll listen nicely. Everyone will agree. You'll all go home and you won't even realize you're in a persuasive moment, because it just felt like life was moving forwards. But when the communication scenario requires your weakness, you don't have the skills in your toolkit to say it in a way that the person can hear you and experience that. So that's why it feels like you're banging your head against a wall, metaphorically. The person can't hear what you're saying. They just seem stubborn and stuck. So the moral of the story is, we don't want to just be strong in two other ways and weaker in two other ways. You need to actually be strong in all four. And to blow your bananas, there are 10 actions for each of the four types, which means there's 40 actions that you can learn. Simple things from remembering to call someone by their name, smiling more, direct connected eye contact, through to way more complicated things like linguistic patterns and how to formulate a structured argument. There are lots of things that you can do. And do you know what? I reckon everyone can be persuasive. Everyone can power up their persuasion. Just got to learn these 40 things and do them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where, why you've had such a great, successful career is, I think your focus isn't on just talking about what you know, it's about helping people to do
Yeah,
what will help them. And again, it's
yeah.
that sense that, if we can be generous in the way we persuade others and support others, and that means sometimes, it's using different emotions, different approaches, and being flexible, which is so
Yes.
important.
Someone said to me the other day in a conversation I was having, they said, oh, I got booked to do a workshop for a client. So I'm just going to do my 1 hour keynote, and I'm just going to put an extra couple of hours worth of activities in there. And I just cringed. I thought, oh, like, what is the world coming to? If you've got longer time as a presenter at an offsite or a conference, and this is whether you're a professional speaker like us or a workplace presenter who is updating the team or whatever, craft activities in the spare time where people are actually doing the work to get better at the thing. You know, in my keynote, people actually practice. So that lady, Jenny, practiced talking to her husband about that coffee ring on the bench. We also talked about a lot of more complicated, confidential work-related matters as well. But we had a laugh at the same time because we had parents trying to get their kids to pick up the dog poop in the garden, and we have people talking about replace the toilet roll in people's homes. Honestly, Daniel, causes a lot of grief. And can I also tell you that the dishwasher is a definite source of contention in most families? The stacking and the unstacking of it is something that people really need therapy over. So again, like, don't sit in misery. Learn how to say this to your partner in a friendly, gorgeous way so that they realize it's really bothering you and they fix it. And then
Yeah,
it's never going to
absolutely.
be a problem again. Let's all move
And
forward.
it again comes back to this thing, right? Which is, if you're going to go and talk to people, care about them. So
Yeah,
care about the experience they have, care about what their problems are, care about where they need to go from and to,
that's
and
it.
it's sit in that service of them through this conversation. Because I think
Yeah.
too many people who ask to present, they think, well, what I've got to say
Oh,
is
yes.
all that matters, and they're going to sit there and listen, and they're going to enjoy it.
No, they're not. And you see, this is why we go together. Empathy and persuasion are so intertwined. You know,
Mm,
if this lady, Jenny, attacks her husband over the ring on the bench, she's getting nowhere fast.
yeah.
But if she can find a way that's in it for him to wipe the ring away at the end of the coffee cup, then he's going to do it.
Mm,
He's not going to do it for her. He's going to do it for himself. When you're
yeah.
in service of the other person and it's all about serving them, that's how you get what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, it's those little things that build up in teams, in leaders, in
Yeah.
people we work with, in marriages, that we
Yeah.
don't have the conversations that we need to. I think
Yeah.
it's so important.
Oh,
Michelle, I love your work.
thank you.
I think everyone should read your books and
Thank
learn
you.
persuasion. And it's been really fascinating. I've got these things, these empathy cards. Now, often
Oh,
I'll take these. They're a little pack of cards. I'll take them to conferences. They've got a
great.
bunch of random questions, and I always
Okay.
like to test them out on my
To
podcast.
learn about people. What a great
Yeah,
idea. Yeah, that's
just a
clever.
different sort of thing.
Yeah,
So
I
this
love
might be
it.
interesting.
Oh, yes.
If you could go back and change one decision in your career, what would it be and why?
Oh, wow. I'm not a regretful kind of a person. If there's something's not working, I fix it or change it. I haven't got a single thing I regret in my career, even jobs where I got sacked. I once got sacked and the boss said, I just don't like you. Even that I don't regret because I feel like, oh, well, that was what was meant to happen in that moment. I was meant to learn that lesson about leaders. And I don't have an emotional connection to it. I just feel like it was all part of the journey. Sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't answer your question directly.
that's perfect. It's like the brightness of the flowers behind you just bounced it off. And um, what about
I
this
live in
one?
regret.
Yeah, that's right. I love it.
Yeah,
What's a
yeah.
song? What's a song that really defines your childhood?
You are the sunshine of my life. Ooh. I had a great childhood and yeah, just sunshine.
Oh, beautiful.
Mm.
And let me see. Last question. What country would you really like to visit and why? I'm sure you've traveled to many, but is there any
Yeah,
country that's sort of on the list you'd really love to go back to or go to for the first time?
I'd love to see the rhododendrons in Bhutan.
Tell me more.
I
Are
love
these the.
flowers.
Oh,
Yeah, so still haven't seen the blossoms in Japan either. So that will be something I'll do soon. Bhutan's probably more on a bucket list, perhaps in the future. But anything where there's beautiful flowers, I love it. Mm.
so good. Michelle, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. The shine, the color, the generosity, it all sort of is pouring through, and
You're
it's always a
amazing.
pleasure chatting to you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and look forward to catching up soon.